Picture this for a second. A thriving, bustling world. You've got harbors absolutely packed with merchant ships. Palaces are just humming with the work of scribes and diplomats. The elite are draped in gold, and armies are wielding weapons of gleaming bronze. It kind of feels permanent, right? But what if I told you that practically overnight, this entire vibrant symphony of human achievement was about to be completely silenced? Welcome to today's Explainer, where we're going to unravel one of the most terrifying and mysterious events in human history, the year civilization simply vanished. A king sits at his desk, writing a letter he will never finish. Outside his palace walls, the horizon is on fire. He doesn't know it yet, but he's literally writing the very last words of his entire civilization. The dramatic irony here is just chilling. I mean, the people living in this era had absolutely no idea what was coming. Over the span of just 50 years, every major power on Earth collapsed. Cities burned to the ground, writing itself was completely forgotten. The civilization they built was entirely erased, launching a mystery that historians are still trying to piece together 3,000 years later.
Section 1. The First Globalized World.
Okay, let's dive into this, because to really understand the fall, we have to understand the sheer heights they'd reached. We need to rewind to 1200 BC. If you're picturing people in crude huts banging rocks together in the Stone Age, just erase that from your mind immediately. The Late Bronze Age was dominated by 5 massive superpowers: Egypt, the Hittite Empire, Assyria, Babylon, and Mycenaean Greece. And they weren't isolated kingdoms at all. They held the known world in this brilliant, delicate balance. The central palaces controlled absolutely everything: the grain reserves, the weapon production, the scribes keeping meticulous records. And what's amazing is the diplomacy. Hittite kings in Anatolia were writing letters to Babylonian rulers, literally addressing each other as brother. And the scale of this trade network? It's staggering. Egyptian pharaohs were trading gold for Cypriot copper. Over in Mycenaean Greece, palaces were importing ivory all the way from Africa, and get this, tin from as far away as Britain. Think about that, a 2,000-mile supply chain operating without modern shipping lanes, GPS, or diesel engines. Why go to all this unbelievable effort? Because these vast interconnected networks were built for one thing: bronze. Bronze was the most valuable material on the planet. It was the ultimate currency, the absolute foundation of every weapon, tool, and plow in their society. They had built a literal golden age.
Section 2. Cracks in the Foundation.
But here's the thing. This unshakable, highly complex system only had about 50 years left. The cracks were about to show. And it didn't start with armies. It started with the Earth itself. The archaeological record reveals a brutal 3-step sequence of disasters. First, around 1250 BC, earthquake storms began. We're talking clusters of massive quakes tearing through the region over decades. Archaeologists have actually found crushed skeletons mid-flight and collapsed walls with the exact same damage signatures across multiple sites. Second, the sky betrayed them. Tree ring and ancient pollen data show a severe, prolonged drought gripping the eastern Mediterranean. Crops failed, and that led to step 3. The grain reserves, the absolute lifeblood of these palace economies, ran completely dry, bringing on massive famine. The sheer tragedy of this moment is perfectly captured in a desperate letter sent by a Hittite queen to Egypt. She wasn't asking for gold or ivory or even soldiers. She was literally begging for grain. Her empire, one of the greatest superpowers on Earth, was starving. And here is a universal truth of human history. Starving populations do not sit still. They migrate. And when they get desperate enough, they arm themselves. This brings us to a terrifying new threat that pops up in the records, moving across the Mediterranean. Egyptian inscriptions simply called them the Sea Peoples. Who were they? Well, historians think they might have been displaced Greeks, Sardinian raiders, or Anatolian refugees fleeing their own collapsing homelands. Most likely, it was a horrifying coalition of all of them, desperate people absorbing every broken population they swept past. Egyptian pharaoh Ramesses III carved records of them at his temple, describing entire nations uprooted. Families, ox carts, the whole shebang, on the move, burning everything behind them because they had absolutely no home to return to.
Section 3. The Domino Collapse.
Now, what's really interesting about this slide is that the arrival of the Sea Peoples wasn't just a war. It was the catalyst for a rapid, unstoppable chain reaction. It's a textbook example of this terrifying concept called a systems collapse. This happens when so many interconnected economies and structures fail simultaneously that the entire network simply comes apart at once. The very trade routes and dependencies that made them so rich and advanced, yeah, they became the exact mechanism that dragged them all down together. Just watch how fast this domino effect happens. Following the earthquakes and droughts starting around 1250 BC, coastal cities like Ugarit burn by 1190 BC. By 1180 BC, the mighty Hittite Empire, a true historical superpower, just vanishes from the record completely, its capital burned and abandoned. Over in Mycenaean Greece, massive palace centers are destroyed in rapid waves of fire, and tragically, their linear B writing system goes up in flames with them. In the blink of an eye, the known world is shattered. Let's actually slow down for a second and step into the ruins of one specific place, the Syrian coastal city of Ugarit. If you want to know what this collapse felt like from the inside, this is it. When archaeologists excavated Ugarit, they found something deeply haunting: clay tablets still sitting inside a baking kiln. They were never delivered. It was a city caught literally mid-sentence, interrupted by the end of its world. One of those final letters was from the king of Ugarit to the king of Cyprus. It reads, "Enemy ships already burning towns. My own army and chariots are away. The kingdom is completely undefended." He was pleading for help, help that he would never, ever receive. Ugarit was burned to the ground around 1190 BC, and it was never rebuilt. Not 10 years later, not a century later, never. Section 4. A world goes dark. So what happens after the fire burns out? We enter this incredibly bleak aftermath, where that highly interconnected, globalized world completely ceased to exist. For nearly 300 years, and over 400 years for Greece, the world went totally, silently dark. Literacy collapsed. There was no monumental architecture, no far-reaching trade, no letters between brother kings. The massive population loss meant that survivors were essentially reduced to isolated villages, just trying to stay alive in a world with nowhere safe left to go. This dark age also brought about the death of bronze. Remember, bronze requires copper and tin, which rely on those massive multi-continent trade networks. When the networks died, bronze became impossibly scarce. So out of pure desperation, surviving societies were forced to experiment with the harder, cheaper metal that they could just find locally: iron. The Iron Age didn't kick off because it was some brilliant technological leap. It began as a desperate survival tactic in the ashes of a fallen world. Section 5. Are we too connected? As we look at the ruins of the Bronze Age, we have to ask ourselves a pretty uncomfortable question. And this brilliantly illustrates the philosophical gut punch of this entire story. Look at the parallels. On the left, 1177 BC, a complex network entirely reliant on bronze. On the right, today, a hyper-connected global economy entirely reliant on technology, microchips, and global shipping lanes. We love to assume that our technology and complexity make us inherently safe, right? That because we're advanced, we are resilient. But the story of the Bronze Age shows us that more connection might actually breed more fragility. Look at these pressure points: drought, famine, waves of refugees. These aren't just ancient problems. When your civilization is a tightly woven tapestry, every single thread relies on the others. Pull just one thread: a climate disaster, a supply chain halt, and a system-wide failure can unravel the entire tapestry in a single human lifetime. The king of Ugarit never finished his final letter. He never learned if his allies were coming to save him. Today, we just keep building and treating and connecting, assuming that our version of the story is going to end differently. But as we look back at the ashes of 1177 BC, it leaves us with one haunting question to carry with us. Are we truly too advanced to fail?